You have to understand that the target lists on both sides hold tens of thousands of potential targets.
Dr. Richard Turco, Research and Development Associates, California.
Targets. But the major targets, for example, in the United States and Soviet Union, comprise the missile silo fields, the strategic bomber bases. In other words, the strategic military bases are certainly the prime targets. And then, of course, there's always the final blow that's considered, and that's the direct targeting at the city centers themselves, purposely to destroy the other guy's civilization. But then there are secondary military bases that have tactical significance. In Canada, there are the radar nets, the early warning systems, communication nodes. There's a strategic St. Lawrence Seaway, for example. Many of the international airports in major cities are also potential targets. Bombers can land there and refuel and take off again. Canada is the first line of defense of North America. Britain is in its own right a nuclear power. It has its own nuclear forces and therefore poses a direct threat to the Soviets in the Eastern Bloc. Of course, West Germany and the other Western European nations would probably be in the front lines of any major conflict.
In Germany, where both East and West camps are in direct confrontation, there is always the feeling that nuclear war is close at hand. As a result, volunteer organizations called civil defense groups have formed in the cities and towns. Approximately 10,000 members in 244 groups meet and rehearse activities such as emergency medical procedures, firefighting, rescue, and communications. Volunteers are responsible for measures to be taken against contamination caused by nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons. But these organizations and exercises are based solely on the assumption that a nuclear war would be a limited one.
The nuclear arms race has entered a very dangerous stage. It's not just in the numbers of new weapons that are going to be built. It's in the new ways of using nuclear weapons, devising...
Dr. Sergei Plekhanov, head of the Political and Social Studies Department, Academy of Sciences, Moscow.
The problem is that if a nuclear war is fought, then somebody will assume that there ought to be a victory in nuclear war, and nobody would like to be the loser. And there will be always a temptation on the side which fears that it is losing to use a higher caliber nuclear yield, thus inviting, a travel to the next ladder of the escalation. The more we know about the effects of a large-scale nuclear war, the clearer it becomes that there will be no post-nuclear world. We have a responsibility to the world which we have inherited. Look, we are the first batch of people on this planet that have enough tools to destroy everything on it. Global nuclear war is a synonym for nuclear suicide. There is no better way of putting it.
The estimate of nearly 8,000 U.S. and Soviet targets may very well be a low estimate. Nor would a nuclear war spare countries outside the two great military alliances, since most of them are seen as belonging to one camp or the other. When the first nuclear missile thunders into the sky towards its target, the final chapter of man's rule on Earth will have been written. Nuclear war is not a natural disaster. It is a horror that man can choose to experience or prevent.
If a total nuclear war were to break out at this moment, and if the United States and the Soviet Union used just 20% of their nuclear weapons at points across the world, the total energy released would be 400,000 times more powerful than the bomb that fell on Hiroshima. These horrifying images would become reality all over the world. Those who had escaped the thermal radiation and the blast in shelters far from the points of detonation would eventually begin to experience difficulties.
Page 102, Section F of the Fallout Shelters Manual. When, as a result of exhalation, humidity goes up to 100%, and should room temperature rise to 35 degrees Celsius, a number of people will lose control. A further rise of 6 degrees will cause a rapidly increasing number of deaths.
These simulations are not from the pages of science fiction or wild fancy, but from facts based strictly on scientific assumptions. It is a fact that military experts believe that 20 to 50% of the world's arsenal of 50,000 warheads would be used in a global nuclear war. Therefore, 10,000 warheads should be understood as the minimum number that will be used. Michael Crepon, Director of the Verification Project, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Washington.
Well, if there is a global nuclear war, the globe is going to become radioactive. Everybody is going to be affected. Allies of the participants as well as the direct participants themselves. I think most military strategists, especially military strategists who have seen the results of nuclear test explosions, and civilians who have seen nuclear test explosions, understand that the use of these weapons in war will have devastating effects. And they understand that war is not a very neat paper and pencil exercise, that wars can get out of hand, that there is chaos on the battlefield, and that you cannot use nuclear weapons and think that you can control the course of that war.
Law and order disappear. Political and social systems collapse overnight. But this is by no means the end of the story. Those people who escaped to shelters underground will finally have to make a decision whether to go out into the open or to wait for their end where they are. Food, water, and even air will be exhausted. This condition could be reached within days. The heat generated by the bodies of those in the shelters will accumulate and begin to exceed the limit beyond which life is possible. The population of the cities in the industrialized countries of the Northern Hemisphere is 1.3 billion. Of this number, 1.1 billion are dead. The deadly effects soon spread around the world. After a nuclear war, rain falls, a black rain like crude oil. A horrifying rain, strongly radioactive. Anyone exposed to it will develop severe radiation burns. In Hiroshima in 1945, rain began to fall soon after the bomb was dropped. For about 3 hours, a torrential downpour fell on the northern and western parts of the burning city. Then ash falls over the ruined cities. Lethal ash, intensely radioactive. If the ash touches the skin, it causes severe radiation burns. If it is breathed in, it continues to emit radiation, causing leukemia and cancers.
It is now almost 40 years since the time that the bombs fell in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In that period of time, we've known many complications of the exposure to the nuclear radiation.
Dr. Howard Hyatt, Dean of the Harvard School of Public Health.
The people who were badly burned have never recovered fully from the physical effects, despite, in the instance of many, repeated surgical operations. The people who were exposed to radiation, many have died in much larger than expected numbers from leukemia, from cancer of the stomach, cancer of the lung, cancer of the thyroid, cancers of other kinds. I suppose nothing quite matches the emotional problems that these people, and as I understand it, a very large fraction of these people continue to carry with them. Many say, even now, that their lives have been changed in ways that they can't describe and that will never revert to normal.
The city of Hiroshima in the summer of 1984 is now a busy regional center with modern buildings and green spaces. But the 40 years that have passed since the day of its destruction have been hard and cruel for those who survived. Under the shadow of the city is the Peace Memorial, one of the few buildings left standing in 1945. Mr. Susuma Yonida, 5 years old at the time, was exposed to radiation, together with his mother and his cousin. They were 1.5 kilometers from ground zero.
Yesterday, my cousin died of cancer, which was probably caused by the atomic bomb. I've just come back from the funeral. She was 44, the same age as me. I don't think she ever imagined it would happen like this, more than 30 years after the bombing. Her body was bleeding, and she was in pain when she died, and her hair was coming out. She died in the same way as so many of the others who were hit by radiation, and I feel it's a warning to me, too. My mother died at the age of 59. It was December, 10 years ago, 29 years after the bombing. I nursed her. She was a patient woman. She was in pain all over, but she bore it. Blood kept oozing out from different parts of her body. You'd wipe it, but it'd come out again no matter how often you wiped it away. She died a miserable death. She really suffered for a whole week. But she'd suffered a long time before that. She really tried to get better, but she couldn't beat the bomb in the end. I suppose it'll be my turn next.
At Hiroshima University, 50,000 clinical records and 600,000 X-ray photographs are kept in the Radiation Medical Research Center. This is a pathological specimen room. Specimens of the internal organs of people who died as a result of the atomic bombing are carefully labeled and preserved. There are more than 6,400. Fever, headaches, dizziness, vomiting, diarrhea, loss of hair, piercing pain, bleeding that cannot be stopped, and before long, stiffening of the body, and eventually, death. This is the typical course of acute radiation sickness. This long-term agony was caused by the radiation released within the first second of the bomb's detonation. The fireball created sucks up huge quantities of highly radioactive earth and dust. The heavier dust falls back to Earth soon after the explosion, covering an area that will extend as far as several hundred kilometers downwind, but But the finer, nearly invisible